to Plug In. This is Mariah, and first off, on behalf of everybody involved with Plug In, I just want to say thank you so much for all the support and the love that we've been getting over the last few episodes, over the last few weeks on our social media platforms. We see the comments. I actually have one that I want to read out right now from John Prick on our Apple Podcast platform. He says, "This podcast radiates and emanates true, active, and specific positivity. God, please be with the creators and their mission." John Prick, we hear you and we thank you for this comment so much. If you feel the same way as John, if you feel anything like this, please do not hesitate to leave a comment on any of the podcast platforms, any of our social media platforms. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. So, on today's episode, we have Nicole Bethany bringing the word to us today. So, buckle up, get your notebook, get a pencil, get something to write, take notes with, because it's about to go down. Nicole Bethany, take it away.
Hey, so today we're going to be talking about relationships. And this is a really nice, spicy topic. And I say that because I think we all kind of have our own idea of relationships or, what they are. But today I really wanted to talk about, why your relationships might not be working. I think a lot of times we talk about, what's a good relationship? What does that look like? But I think before we can get into what a good relationship looks like, I think it's important to talk about maybe why your relationships aren't working. So I don't have a lot of points for this specific area, but I think the first point that I wanted to really focus on is the idea that, well, not the idea, but I think what I want to focus on is really the fact that you probably were thinking about a romantic relationship when I was talking about it just now. And you probably weren't thinking about familial relationships, work relationships, friendship relationships. Maybe you were thinking about friends, right? But maybe you weren't thinking about your family, your parents, your siblings, your cousins, that uncle that really annoys you. Maybe you weren't thinking about that, So today we're going to really break down relationships. And so I actually looked up the definition. And basically what relationships means is whenever you enter relationships are basically what the definition said is when the two intermingle together, two or more people share connection with each other. But another definition that I found was, and really I think this is just me trying to break down this word, is whenever you enter into a relationship, you begin to have a collision course with the person's mind. And so you may not even know that you're having a collision with the person's mind. But let's say I meet somebody at school, right? I'm automatically colliding with their mind. The way they're talking to me, the way they think, the way they act, all that is being translated to me. And so that's just a friend, let alone a romantic encounter, right? So I like looking at that. Proverbs 23:7 says, "As a man thinketh, so is he." And so what we think in our mind is so important for how we translate it. And a lot of times we're friends with people that don't really have the best thoughts in their mind. I mean, I think, I think we think that, they think about, for example, let me break it down. For example, you meet somebody and you notice that they always pessimistic. They always just have the most negative things to say. They just have all the bad news in the world. Every time y'all link, first thing they do, he said, she said, they said. And so I've had friends like that where every time we would link, they always complaining. And so I remember I caught myself, this is a while ago, this is probably in high school. High school, I learned so much about just relationships and really, did I listen to the red flags God was giving me? No.
course not.
But
Why would we do that?
Right, why would we do that? No, the guys, listen to the red flags. Anyway, no, but like I definitely didn't, but I learned from them. And I know we probably had a lot of friends like that are just joke around with those things, but they're also always speaking negativity. So I noticed that I also started speaking negative things. God, y'all, I wasn't kissing my friends. Like, I was just with my friends having communication, talking, and that's what I'm saying. Whenever you're in a relationship, you're having a collision course with their mind. And so, as a man thinketh, so is he, as I said, Proverbs 23:7 says. And so, no matter, you can't control it. That's why who your friends are very important. Who you surround yourself with is very important. What are they thinking in their mind? Who are they, right? Who are they behind closed doors? Who are they in public? Who are they in winter, spring, summer, and fall, okay? Who are they? And that's really important. And so I just wanted to open up with that because I think I want to get your minds thinking about the relationships you have, not just romantic. Let's stop. Let's stop just like thinking about relationship in the romantic sense. Let's really think about like, what's your relationship with your grandma? You know, or what's your relationship with your grandpa, right? Or what's your relationship with your mom or your dad or your whoever, right? It doesn't matter. Your brother, your sister, whoever. What are your relationships with them? And now your friendships. And I think one thing that's important is when you're in a the relationship with your family and your friends are different. Inevitably, we know this, you know. Your family they're not people you necessarily chose, but your friends are people that you choose. But I really find it interesting that a lot of times we as people, we don't want to deal with dysfunction in our family, the family that God gave us, the family that we didn't choose, but we settle for the dysfunction in our friendships, the people that we can choose. Isn't that goofy?
That's
Yeah.
goofy.
That's goofy. It's goofy. But we do, right?
Yeah.
We'll be like, oh no, my aunt is very toxic. I'm not going to be sitting next to her on Thanksgiving. But your friend that you met that you truly don't have to be friends with is extremely toxic. Literally not giving you life, literally not helping you grow. And yet you seem more comfortable with Jerome than Aunt Alexa or whatever. And it's really interesting, you know, and I think that just came to me. I don't even know why I said that, but I think it was for somebody because like I know that, and of course this is normal, but I think if we put that energy in friendships, we would actually be a lot healthier and able to handle the dysfunction in our family, if that makes sense. You know, we put so much energy in people that we truly don't have to be with. They're friends. I could cut you off tomorrow. And I'm not saying that to be like mean, you know, like of course I'm going to really go into like the different kinds of relationships. But with friends, you know, friends are more so, I feel, in my opinion, this is my opinion, this is not the Bible, this is my opinion. In my opinion, I think friends are definitely, you have friends that are seasonal and friends that are long term.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we try and put seasonal friends in long term relationships and it becomes toxic. And I think there are certain seasons for certain friends. I do not have the same friends I had in elementary school, but my spirit's Gucci. Like, you know, like my spirit's not saying, hey, go text back your friend from second grade. No, like it's okay. I'm good. But I have friends that I've known since I was like 1 year old, you know, and I'm still friends with them and we're mad close. You know what I mean? But I know that's for a reason because we haven't really disconnected. And even when we argue, even when we've had disagreements, there's something that still pulls us together. And I'm going to get into it because I don't want people to get mixed up. I don't want you to think that, oh, well, you know, we argue and we're toxic, but it's okay. Like, I feel like we're meant to be with each other. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. And I'm going to get into it later. But what I'm saying is, there are certain relationships that I noticed that God has kind of turned me away from, kind of moved me, shifted me. And I went from us hanging out with each other all the time to you didn't even text me back and I forget to text you back. And it's kind of like a separation. And so God sometimes separates you. Now, this is not my opinion. God will sometimes separate you from the people that you think you need in that season to try and move you to the next season.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't go to the next season with everybody. It's just, it is what it
That's
is.
Very true. Very true.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it may look like, oh wow, like I have no friends anymore. Nobody's hitting me up anymore. On top of that, I'm single. Like, what is going on, God? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What is
It's so true. It's so
It's
true.
true.
Like that exact thought pattern. In that order.
Literally.
But it's true. And hey, there's nothing wrong with singleness. Singleness is beautiful, and I'm going to talk about it. But yeah, no, I'm ain't going to lie. Like, we've probably all had that thought process. Even though you're being separated, he's separating you so that you can actually see the room that he's trying to put you in. We talk a lot about waiting room, right? Okay, so you were in the waiting room, right? Again, we're artists here. So you're at an audition. You go to an audition. You don't just walk in and start performing. Anybody that doesn't know. You walk in and you have an audition room, and it's a waiting room usually. I mean, a waiting room, not an audition room, excuse me. You walk in and there's a waiting room usually. And there are people with, maybe they have numbers on them or whatever kind of audition it is. Usually if it's for a musical, you're going to get a number or whatever. And you're going to have like your books. People are going to have all their stuff out everywhere and really just sometimes obnoxious with it, just everywhere. Like Mariah's like, yeah,
It's true.
In a
full
full
split, like
for
for
a
no
vocal
reason.
audition.
they in full split with their notes, like leaning forward. I'm
Oh
like,
my God.
okay. But yeah, so you have people there, and so just to give you a visual, you have people there that you meet, and because of the adrenaline, because of the excitement, and because theater kids are a lot, you're meeting friends, you're meeting people, and they're like, hey, how are you? What piece are you doing today? Or what are you singing? Or what are you going to be, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you up to? Like, how's everything? And so you're meeting friends and you're getting to know the people in the room, right? You're getting to know the people next to you that are also maybe going into the same room. Like I said, you're in the waiting room. You're preparing, like we said in another episode. You're preparing. You're getting ready. Also, by the way, if you haven't listened to the episode about patience, this would be a good time to click off, go back, listen to the episode about patience, because that's where we really break down the waiting room visual. But anyway, to move forward, you're making friends. Once the person at the door calls your name, right? You now have more. Usually, I mean, y'all chime in. Usually, you have more adrenaline. You're more excited. You're more present, right?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yes. Like, yeah, like I came in a little bit of anxiety, but now I'm like, okay, I can do this because, Billy Joe said he could do it, so I can do it too.
Right.
Billy Joe, what you know?
Billy Joe. So anyway, now the producer calls you in or whatever, right? They call you in and they say, okay, Gabriella, it's time for you to come in. And so you walk in, but guess what? Usually you walk in alone. And so now Billy Joe and Steve and Alexa, all of them are in the waiting room still while you're in the next room. And you still have to move. You still have to, even though you don't have Billy Joe, even though you don't have Steve or Alexa that you met in the waiting room, that hyped you up, that really like helped you in your journey to get to the next room.
Mm-hmm.
You in the next room alone. Right? And so we can parallel that with how God separates us. Because truthfully, after the audition, you're never going to speak to Billy Joe again. Unless Billy Joe gets cast in the same show, right?
Right.
But honestly, most times you're never going to meet the same people again. There are so many auditions that I've met so many great people and they were like, oh my God, like follow me on Insta. And we literally don't talk. So that goes to say, my point in this is that when you're in the room, when God is trying to separate you, He's not doing it because he's mad at you. He's not doing it because he's angry at you. He's doing it because you have to move. And sometimes those people that are there with you right now are not for the next season. They're not for the next room. Billy Joe cannot help you belt. in the next room when you're trying to sing. You know what I mean? Billy Joe might be a distraction in the next room while you're trying to do that high belt. Billy Joe might actually distract you and you start crack-a-lacking in the room. You know what I mean? So it's very important that we're cautious about that. So that's the first point. Make sure you, going back to my first point, just thinking about what are your relationships with the people around you, especially your friends? Are they elevating you? Are they helping you? Are they growing you? Anything that's not growing you is depleting you, best believe. If it's not growing you, if you don't feel like you're being challenged, if you don't feel like you are being elevated through it, it is depleting you. It is depleting you. It is depleting you. There is no such thing as, oh, we just, there's no such thing. That means that you're not getting anything out of that relationship. If you think of someone right now, if you think about your friend right now, and I'm saying friends because, like I said, family is not something that we choose, right? Of course, not mitigating, not trying to lessen the fact that, families can hurt us, not because I know people that families can hurt. But I think my point goes to say is that, I believe that if you are in a family with dysfunction and you are able to identify the dysfunction, you're most likely called, not by Nicole, not by Jessica, called by God to break the dysfunction.
That's heavy.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about it the other day. It's the difference between a generational curse and a generational choice. People like to put off their family issues and things of that nature and say, oh, it runs in my family.
Yeah.
Oh, it does this. Oh, I can't do it. It's just my family. It's how we are. When really, just like you said, if you can identify what the problem is, you're more than likely called to break that.
Yeah.
And that's a choice that you have to make. So you're right.
Yep. That's a word on itself. Oh, that's a word on itself. And actually, if anyone's interested, I have a sermon that I can leave in the show notes that really breaks down what we're talking about. Because I'm sure some people are like, what are they even, But I'm going to definitely make sure that we leave it in the show notes for you. Yes. So, first point, make sure, check your relationships with everybody around you. Stop trying to worry about romantic relationships first when you haven't talked to your brother in like 5 years. And of course, I know that it's like, it's more complicated than that, but check it, check it, identify it and do something about it, or try at least, right? And by do something about it, I mean, sometimes the most you can do is pray. And that's a lot, Sometimes we think prayer is just, oh, well, I just prayed. I don't know. But prayer is so powerful. So don't lessen the value of prayer. Point number 2, singleness. We kind of touched on this briefly. We made a joke. We were laughing. We're happy, though. Don't worry. I think singleness definitely has a... No, stop laughing. Singleness definitely has a dusty stigma. And I call it a dusty stigma because it's getting old. Like, this idea that, like, singleness is, oh, you must be lonely, or your bed must be cold, or you sure you okay? Like, are you sure you don't want a relationship? Yeah, I'm sure. I know that I'm not ready for... I think people don't understand really what the purpose of a relationship is. And if we go back to what we were talking about, relationships are supposed to grow you, boo. And if it's not growing you, but it's giving you anxiety, then it's not a relationship. It's actually destruction. It's just destruction. But anyway, I want to talk about singleness for a second. This is my second point. So my second point is you don't know how to be alone. You've never been alone before. When I come for you right now, just know I'm coming for myself. But I'm not talking about, oh yeah, I've been alone. Like, I never had a boyfriend before I was like 18. Like, I've been alone all my life. Like, nobody liked me. Like, and now I'm ready. Like, and no, that's not what I'm talking about, because singleness really comes into fruition when you are actually alone. When you are actually navigating the world and spaces around you, low key on your own. And I say low key because, of course, we're in college and, like, I still have my parents, you know what I mean? Like, I still live with my parents, but I have seasons where I'm away from my parents for the first time in my life. And so I'm able to navigate places and spaces on my own. I have to make decisions on my own now because I'm not under the care of my parents for a lot of time. And what are you doing in that time of singleness? I think singleness, I like to look at it as a waiting room too. And not to, and I don't want it to, I don't want anyone to think of the waiting room analogy as somewhere where you're anxious and somewhere where you're just waiting. I like to really focus on the fact that in the waiting room, you have to be doing something. You have to be doing something. So, and if you're not doing something, then when you get to the next room, you're just dragging it. So usually God doesn't want you to get to the next room until you start moving in the waiting room. But in the next room, right, if you haven't prepared in that waiting room space, even if it's like for a doctor's appointment, there's certain information that you need to tell the nurse when you get to the next room. If you didn't pull that out or you didn't look at that in the waiting room, you're literally wasting her time. And so that's kind of, you can look at that in that way too, where, when you're not preparing in that waiting room area, you are not prepared in the next room. So the great thing about God is he doesn't put you in the next room until you're ready. So a lot of times it looks like, oh God, I'm praying, I'm not moving, I'm on, like, I literally just want to move, or I just want my boyfriend, or I just want this, or I just want that new job, or I just want that. And God's like, okay, but you're not ready. You're just truly not ready. And I just don't like seeing you look goofy. Aren't you tired of looking goofy? And even if you look goofy in the waiting room, guess what? God still got you. That's how graceful he is. It's so amazing. So you can make mistakes in the waiting room that keep you in the waiting room for so long. And the door's open and God's like, I'm just waiting for you to literally let that person go. Literally tell Billy Joe bye. It's time to go. Come on. So singleness, I see it as a waiting room. And singleness, I look at the definition. It truly just means not being married. It just means not being married. And I think, I don't know, I'm from New York, so a lot of us say, solo dolo, we on our solo dolo, we're solo on the down low, for anybody that doesn't know what I mean. And, even that whole term is kind of, I think that also keeps the stigma of singleness, because the idea of being solo, being on your down low, it's kind of like, okay, sure, but why is there this idea that because you're single, you kind of have to hide? What?
Say it again.
What is this idea that no, I'm joking, but why? No, but why is it that when we're single, we feel like we have to hide? Why we gotta be on a dolo?
Right.
Why? Why do we have to be on the down low? I don't understand. Anybody want to actually explain that? Because I really don't understand. Why do y'all think that? I think that's a really interesting place to actually discuss for a second.
I was just going to say, I feel like especially for the millennials / Gen Z kind of generations, I think it's almost looked at as a shame to be single. You have to be in a relationship to flourish. You have to be in a relationship. Relationships are great, blah, 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 whatever. When in all actuality, what you just said, your singleness is, we talked about this a couple days ago. Being alone is not the same as being lonely.
Yep.
So you shouldn't be ashamed of being alone.
Yeah.
When you're alone, you have that time to grow and you have that time to prepare yourself to be in that next place, in that next room, right? So there's really the stigma of being alone and that being such a bad thing. It's got to stop. It really does. Because you do the best things when you grow.
Yes.
And you know what? And you're probably going to get to it. So I won't dwell on it too much. I know other people have other things they want to say, so I don't want to take nobody's ideas. But a lot of the relationships that we have nowadays, or I'll speak for myself, a lot of the relationships that I have or had in the past were extremely forced. And that's why they didn't work, because they didn't belong together. When we were talking about, I was watching something that Nicole sent me. Jerry Flowers is a preacher. And he said something about, you're a bird and the person that you're trying to be with is a fish. right? If y'all try to be together, right, it's either the fish has to get out of the water and be in the air with the bird, or the bird has to be in the water for the rest of their lives and be with the fish. Somebody's not going to be comfortable.
Somebody's not going to be okay.
Someone's not going to be okay, right? So you got to let that go. Some things are just not meant to be. And the quicker you find that out and you be okay with being alone instead of forcing it, the better you're probably going to be. Or I'll speak for myself, the better I'm going to be.
Right. So. Same here.
I mean, you can speak for me too, personally. I think for me personally, well, I'm just going to explain. I'm not going to go into my whole experience, but I think before I didn't really understand what singleness meant when I was in it. I'm still in it, though. But I think at the time, the reason why I was hiding is because I didn't know how important the time was. So I just felt like, let me put my little hood over my head, headphones in, it was, speaking my rod wave, heart been broke so many times, I don't know what to believe. I was like, oh, my young boy, just like mind your business, head down. But it's really like, for me, if I just really knew what that time meant, how important it was, like, I don't know, I wouldn't have tried to hide. I wouldn't have been trying to hide. I would have just been doing my thing. And I don't know if anybody else notices this too, but like when God is really like doing work through somebody, and like they're like in their waiting room. When God's like doing the heart surgery, as Nicole said before.
Usually in the waiting room.
In the waiting room, yeah. Like it seems like they don't really. They're not as social. But for me, I feel like I can speak for myself when I say I've noticed, like, especially with like certain friends of mine, like when they're in their waiting room, like it's not that they're hiding, but it's just the fact that they're not who they used to be because they're moving in stage 2. But I feel like sometimes for me, I'll say that I see it as hiding because it's like they're kind of like they're not like physically like avoiding me getting out of the way, but again, like they're getting that surgery done, they're in their waiting room, but I'm not in there yet, so it almost kind of seems like they're on their own path, and it kind of like, I don't know, you can kind of see the separation. It's like a
interesting you're talking about the other side of it. Yes, that's important too.
I think I'm still in it, so
no, I feel that. I think on just for clarity, like I think there's always going to be another waiting room. Like it's not, oh, okay, my waiting room season's done, I'm in the audition room. Like, no, as you can see, the audition room is not the last step for the show, right?
Callback, maybe.
There's callback.
Yeah.
There's second callback. There's third callback. There's final round. And then after final round, there's rehearsal. And there's rehearsal number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 10, 11, 12.
Right.
13, 14, 15. Okay, but like, there's so many rehearsals. And then there's tech. Those of y'all that don't know what tech is, it's
pretty much
the definition of the waiting room.
No, for real.
For real. That's a big waiting room. Such a good point, Gabriella. Like, yes. And so, anyway, that's just my point. And then there's a show. But then after the show, there might be interviews, bro. And after and then maybe after the show, your agent tells you there's another show that you have to audition for. And so it looks like you're starting the process all over again, but you're not. You're just elevating differently. And just to clarify, like, there's not one waiting room in life, and then it's all breezy. Each area has its own set of challenges, right? And so when you got God on your side, when you're being ordered by his steps, not your own, a lot of times we're ordered by our steps, and then we say, oh, God got me here, and God's like, I truly didn't. Like, you truly think that, like, that is where I had for you, but actually I had much greater. Actually, like, I actually desire for you to be much more than where you are. And so a lot of times we think that this is for another episode, truly. But I think that's my problem with manifestation, there's nothing wrong with the idea, but I think how it's executed and how it's advertised as on social media by celebrities, by our peers, is false and contrary to the will of God, because you cannot manifest without prayer. You cannot manifest without seeking godly counsel. You cannot basically, for those that don't know, manifesting, I'm not going to get into it because this is a whole other topic that I really want to talk about, but manifesting is basically, and any one of y'all can chime in and if I don't say it in its fullness, but manifesting is basically speaking something that you desire and want. Kind of the whole idea of, and this is taken from the Bible, speaking something into existence, really. But speaking it into existence and then seeing it. So a lot of times, the problem with manifesting that I have is that, and why it's dangerous, is because it's doing everything in your own strength. And I think, a perfect example, quickly, this is a quick tangent. Perfect example, because a lot of times we want to manifest our boyfriends, our girlfriends. We want to manifest, our relationships. We want to manifest the job. We want to manifest the car. We want to manifest being a millionaire in 5 months. Okay, so we love B. Simone, or maybe we don't. I don't. I used to love her. I don't hate her. I love her with the way Jesus calls me to love her, because I don't really know her truly.
Love you with the love of the Lord.
I'm gonna start saying that.
But B. Simone, for those of you that don't know, calls herself the manifesting queen. If anybody doesn't know, B. Simone recently, not that recent anymore, but she manifested that she would have her book out about manifestation, and that she'll be a millionaire. Was it millionaire or billionaire? Millionaire, right? But anyway, long story short, she's a comedian and an entrepreneur, and she's great. But she calls herself the manifesting queen, and what she does is she says that everything that she has is because she manifested it. Because she manifested it. I manifested it. And I'm like, okay. And right before her eyes, the book that she manifested actually was, the book actually turned out to be complete copy of another book. Like, they just copied the pages. She's just one of the many people, and it's not to call her out, these people, they're learning, they're growing just like we are, but just to let you know, manifesting is cute. And yeah, sure, there is power. The Bible says there's power of life and death is in the tongue, right? It says that in the Bible. So truly, when you're manifesting, you're just using the human power that God innately gave you. Innately. However, whose authority are you working under?
Sure. Yep.
Right? Because let me tell you something about Satan, okay? He loves to give you things. He loves bruh, isn't he annoying? He loves to give you things. He loves to, oh, you want this? Sure. Just come and get it. It's mad easy. Just here you go. Satan loves to do things like that. And then once you take the thing from his hand, he's like, great, now you're in bondage for 5 years. He's not going to tell you to find print. Satan reminds me of those commercials, or for Viagra, for example, where they're playing the fancy music. And so, can someone actually give me some fancy music right now? Because I actually want to act it out. Viagra can cause heart attack, stroke, diarrhea, suicide, and death. While the song is playing,
but I don't know. I do not know.
This Titanic.
Right, because what? But also, we are not Viagra sponsors. No, that was okay. We don't know nothing. It was just an example.
Fully an example, but I'm pretty sure those are fully the side effects. Just look it up.
That's funny.
Anyway, what I'm saying is that's how Satan is. That's how he is. The music is playing, and he's under the fine print, and you can't really hear because the music sounds so great. You see how nice Mariah's voice sounded? But I was talking about death.
That's beautiful.
You understand what I'm saying? So anyway, that's how Satan works. And so when you manifest, you don't know what power you're operating from. Also, God doesn't give you everything you want. He gives you everything you need. So, for example, just using B. Simone as an example, and I don't know if she's ever going to listen to this, but if she does, girl, It's possible that God is calling you to be a billionaire, but you settled for a millionaire because you were trying to do it in your own strength. So now in 5 months, you became a millionaire. But if you were doing it in God's plan and God's timing, it's possible that in 8 years, he wanted to make you a billionaire. And so now there's so much money that you might lose because of that book scandal, because you were trying to do everything in your strength. And usually manifestation, you're doing things to please others. So back to relationships, boomerang and back. Usually when you're manifesting a relationship, you kind of do it in your strength to kind of make the manifestation work. But if it's God's will, if it's for God's plan, it will work. It will work itself out. But it's not going to be the way it's not going to be the way you want it to look ever. So singleness is important because it's a time, like Mariah said, where you are able to be alone. And it's important to be alone. What is the definition of being alone? Being alone is being separated from others, right? And it's important to be separated from others, like we just spoke about for the past, I don't even know how long. But being separated from each other from others is important because that's a time where God wants to surround you with other people that are there to grow you, but also to make sure that you grow your relationship with God. I think a lot of times we focus a lot on our relationships horizontally, but not vertically. You know, we try to ignore God. We try to ignore him. That's why I hate the saying the man upstairs. Like, I don't know if y'all heard it, the man upstairs. But I don't like it because when you say the man upstairs, you could just be downstairs and pretend that he's not up there. And if you never don't walk upstairs, you're never going to know that. You're never going to actually face the man upstairs. So you just call him the man upstairs because you're always downstairs. Why are you always downstairs? Go upstairs. He's not scary. Right? He's not scary. You know what I mean?
She said, go upstairs.
Go upstairs. It's important to have a relationship with God. And if you don't have a relationship with God, is to really understand what Jesus is saying in John 3:3, where he says, you must be born again to see the kingdom of heaven. And seeing the kingdom of heaven is that relationship, is having that spiritual understanding. And when you're born again, you believe that Jesus died for you, he rose again. And you also understand that making him your Lord means that you're allowing him to have control over your life. And also the understanding that he saved you from your sin. And I think a lot of times the wrath of God is shown, but not the love of God. And the wrath of God is for evil, not for you, right? And so when destruction happens, we're like, oh, wow, God must be mad at me. It's like, well, actually, no. The struggles you have, the addictions you have, the dysfunctions you have, they're not your fault. I mean, the Bible says we were born into sin, and that's what that means. And sometimes, most of the time, they're generational choices. And so they're not your fault. However, I think the first step about relationships as well, why they might not be working, another point is that you've never been alone with God. And so for those that know God, you've never spent alone time with God, never got to know him for yourself. And for those that don't know God, or don't know him yet, or just learning more about him, you've actually never actually devoted a time or devoted research or, gone to a church or streamed a service online, because now we're online, or, listened to a sermon or something. So being alone is very important because that's a time where God really shows you yourself. And so when I went to college, that was the first time that I was alone. And that's when I realized, like, oh, okay, now I'm single. Like, I don't have my parents around. I don't have my siblings around. This is singleness. And singleness is okay, y'all. However, lonely, the definition of lonely that a lot of people see singleness as, the definition of lonely is sad from being alone. And so what is making you sad while you're alone? I think the great thing about sad from being alone, that definition implies that aloneness does not equate to loneliness, but in fact, you can have different feelings, different states of being in that state of being alone. But what are you doing in that state of being alone? What are you doing? Are you growing yourself? Are you filling yourself up with things that feed your soul? What's your relationship with God? Are you getting to know him? Are you talking to him? Or are you still pretending that he's the man upstairs, right? So That's very important. That's something that I've learned about. I think singleness is something that I think we should talk about another time, because I think it's such an amazing topic, and the fact that we're all single, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But singleness is so important.
Damn.
But we're all single. And I think singleness is so important and very undervalued in our culture. But it's so important and so vital. That's where we're kind of going to end off. I think one thing that I wanted to just mention is that singleness is important because it's a time where God actually aligns you with your purpose, and you're not actually, I don't even want to say distracted, because sometimes not every distraction is a bad distraction. You know what I mean? Like, we're distracted by doing school and also this podcast and also other things. Doesn't mean that they're wrong, but our attention is pulled for many different things. And sometimes there are good distractions, right? So singleness keeps you from bad distractions. Well, really, the purpose of the season is to keep you from bad distractions. But a lot of times when we're single, we either go dolo, we try and hide with a hoodie on, or we try and surround ourselves with a whole bunch of people to fill the emptiness that we have or may feel. Mm-hmm. And so if you're single right now, but you're alone, if you're single right now, you're alone, yes. But if you feel sad from being lonely, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling weary, I would like to actually challenge you, because maybe, yes, maybe you're going through those emotions, but maybe, just maybe, God is trying to reveal a dysfunction that actually might negatively affect the person you're trying to align with, whether it's friendship, whether it's romantic. And so if you don't deal with your issues in singleness, you're not going to be able to be a suitable person for the person you're trying to be with. You're not going to be able to be suitable for that person. And then next week, we're going to talk about really the difference between suitability and compatibility, because it's really important. And just go into the meat of relationships, the hardy stuff of relationships. This is just kind of an opener. What are your relationships like? The first point, think about relationships with your family, not just romantic. The second point, you've never really been alone. And the third point, make sure you have a relationship with God. And so the second point and the third point go into each other, because you can't really have the third point without the second point. Now, there are some people that never really had a season of singleness, and they've met God. It's not to, not to eliminate that idea. However, and I noticed this, that, from growing up and seeing like, oh, wow, like now you're trying to have your singleness in marriage, because you never had your singleness when you were single.
Child.
Ouch.
Baby girl, baby boy. You would have been able to have that if you actually had your state of singleness. So singleness is cute. Like we said, that's not to say that there's no way for you to not know God without your state of singleness. But best believe your relationship with God and your relationship with the people around you is much stronger when you've had your state of being alone. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm going to end off today, because I think next week we're just going to really dive into what the Word of God says about singleness, what the Word of God says about sex, what the Word of God says about other areas of relationship that are really important to talk about. And then also just go into the dysfunctions that you might be in. So think about it before you listen to next week's episode. What are the relationships you're doing? Why are they not working? Or why do you think they're working when they're actually really not? So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank y'all so much for plugging into today's episode. Definitely an episode that I needed. So I'm sure if I needed it, somebody else needed it. Tune in next week, Wednesday, 12 o'clock for part 2. If you like this episode, you're definitely going to like next week's episode. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Plug and Light. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, also at Plug and Light. And if you have any questions, any prayer requests, any testimonies, or topics that you want us to talk about, shoot us an email at plugandlight@gmail.com. Also, please feel free to leave a review and share this episode with somebody. Leave a comment on any of our platforms. Leave a comment on our social media platforms. And please share this episode with somebody if it fed your soul and brought light to your day. Until next week, y'all.